If you are in conflict, if you are in fight, if there is tension in your mind, in your heart, in your body between who you are, your aspirations, your roles and responsibilities, your life that you're living right now versus the life you want to be living or that you feel called to live, and you feel like you have a calling on your life, your ancestors, God, your spirituality, the universe, whatever you believe in, is calling you to something bigger than yourself, then this is a conversation. This is a yarn for you. This is for all the mothers, all the First Nations women women from cultural backgrounds. This is for anyone that it resonates with, but this particular yarn is coming from the lived experience of being a mother, being a woman, being an Indigenous woman, and someone who has a big calling on my life. I have deep aspirations of my own. I'm a very proud, staunch mother of 5 children and Anishan to many more. And I'm also just a woman who's on her own healing and reclamation and remembering dream of taking back my power, my birthright of being worthy, having been born worthy. My story is not born from the trauma and the adversity that I have been through. My story is seated in the womb of my ancestors. I am culturally grounded, ancestrally guided, and dreaming led. I am Chantel Thompson. I am the Barkindji warrior heart, and this is my truth. That is the birthplace of my story, not my trauma, not the adversity. Yes, I have faced adversity and trauma, and it has influenced my journey. It has shaped me in some ways, but it did not and does not define, and it is not the birthplace of my story. And yet that is how I have been made to feel. And the tension between all of those roles and responsibilities and how to live in the 21st century as a proud First Nations woman, as a mother, coming from a culture and social condition that it is our obligation to contribute, to sacrifice for the betterment of others. And yet I want to push back and say that the level of obligation and expectation on strong, powerful women and mothers and First Nations women who lead is almost the expectation that in order to serve others is to sacrifice the self, is to abandon the self in some extreme cases, is that in order to be a good mother or to be a good leader, we need to come last. And this is the yarn that I want to have. This is the challenge that I want to have, is that we are a part of the collective that we serve, that we matter alongside those that we love and serve, that our humanity and our human experience and our well-being and our inner peace, our inner journey is the seed and the foundations for how we show up and lead and live and love and serve. This is the yarn that I want to have with you, mob. So if you are new here, my name is Chantel Thompson and I am the Barkindji warrior heart. I'm a proud mum of 5 children. My journey of becoming a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu after 20 years of practice. I'm a 3-time world champion. I'm the founder of the Killer. I'm an entrepreneur, a storyteller, and my story is one of reclamation and remembering of my power. It is the birthplace of my journey of going from suicide to world champion. And I am so grateful to be here with you to have this yarn. This is going to be a series of yarns around the journey of how do we weave the warrior heart into our world? How do we weave ourselves into our dreaming and into our motherhood? This is for anyone that the world has told you that you are too much, that you are not enough, or that you had to be someone other than yourself, or you had to hide or forget parts of yourself in order to belong, in order to be accepted, in order to be allowed, in order to be safe. And it's about what does it take to be ourselves in a world that was not defined or shaped or written by us and for us. It is about those of us that have the courage to stand up and reclaim our truth and our power from our hearts and grounded in our cultural sovereignty as women, as mothers, and as First Nations, or women who come from a cultural background, Black, Indigenous women of colour. This is for you. And this is something that has come about from my own experience of having the courage to step forward, no longer willing to settle or no longer willing to risk or live in burnout or self-sacrifice or self-abandonment to fulfill toxic levels of obligation and attachment to what others and what I had been conditioned to be, what it means to be a mother and an Indigenous woman. And starting to explore, what does my inner purpose look like? How do I want to show up and be the most powerful mother and woman and Indigenous woman that I can be and leader that I can be through my own becoming, through my own being, that when I show up and serve those places, it is from a place of overflow. It is from a place of alignment and truth, contribution, reciprocity, respect, and resonance, that it is co-created between me and those that I serve and the world at large and the purpose that I have. And that I do not need to burn out, that to love others is not to love myself any less, and that to love myself is to love others, to ground my service, my leadership, my contribution, my legacy, my love in the foundations of my well-being and my overflow. And this came about from experiences that I've had where I literally got to a point where I had to Google and sit with some very key, powerful women that are in my world, and even ChatGPT around the difference between self-acceptance and narcissism, when I was having experiences where other people were saying to me that my self-expression, my wanting to be a part of my own journey and wanting to have my own aspirations and goals was meaning that I was sacrificing those that I love in service of my own ego, particularly from those that couldn't see the bigger vision that I hold, the bigger calling that I hold, and that I'm a woman and a mother. I'm a woman who has her own aspirations and love for my children, that I'm a woman and a First Nations woman and a mother. And how do I weave these together in a way that they are interdependently independent, they are self-sustaining, and that each role honors the other, that they're not in this fight or flight or conflict and tension with each other. And that is the yarn, that is the experience that I'm having, and the question that I carry in my heart and my spirit is, how do I weave it all together in a way that it is nurtured and seeded in my heart and in my spirit? And I can show up in each of those roles in a way that they weave together and that they honor each other. When I'm being the mother, that honors the weaving and the legacy and the culture that I hold. When I'm in my entrepreneurship and my calling, that also resources, honors my role as a mother. And this is about what is at the heart of the warrior heart journey, and speaks to the depths of walking with radical responsibility and honesty and truth, grounded in culture and sovereignty. Looking at this through the principles and practices of being a First Nations woman, knowing that pre-colonial times, patriarchal and colonial conditioning, burnout was not a thing. Individuals were not expected to carry the collective. We were expected, our responsibility was to show up and contribute what we had to the best of our ability to the collective purpose. It was not to sacrifice ourselves to the collective purpose. It was to show up and give what we had from who we were. And if our contribution was bigger than someone else's, it was because our capacity was bigger. And I feel and have experienced that the expectations on women, on mothers, on First Nations women is this toxic level of obligation and leadership and self-sacrifice in a way that doesn't honor or respect the experience and the needs of the woman at the center of being a mother, of being a leader, of being an auntie, or being being an Indigenous woman in a modern day context, and what that means. It is not the individual's job to carry the collective, and yet I feel that is what many do. And when I looked at self-acceptance and First Nations ways and practices of being and doing, I really had to sit with all this. If you're still here, please share a comment below around what is your experience in carrying other roles and responsibilities, and where there may be conflict in your world. Hit like, hit subscribe, and so that you can follow on for more of these yarns. Let's grow our community. And if you want to know more about these types of yarns and the Warrior Heart, come and join me over in my community called the Warrior Heart Community over on School. The link will be below in the comments, and let's walk and weave this journey together. Let's show up and stand in our power, be our truth, and follow our hearts, because we know what we're fighting for. If you are someone who the world has told you that you are too much, not enough, or you had to be someone other than your full self to belong or to be safe, then this is a community for you. If you have shown up and you have fought for yourself, or you are fighting for yourself, and you know deep down and you are soul aware, not self-aware, but soul aware, which is a concept that I have been learning from Patrice Washington from Redefining Wealth. And it is that you are at a body and a spirit level aware of your aspirations and your desires, your pain and your trauma, and you can lead and be led from a soul level. You live from a soul level awareness and guidance, not self-awareness, not in the head, but in the body, in the heart, and in the spirit. This is what it means to be soul aware. And in my notes and in my yarns with other people, what really came through is that self-acceptance is about embracing the fullness of who we are, our light and our shadow, our strengths and our flaws, with compassion and truth, with ownership and responsibility. It is about acknowledging our humanity, including our mistakes, traumas and imperfections, without judging or shaming. And from a cultural lens, self-acceptance is about knowing who you are and being grounded in your identity, seated in your identity as a First Nations person. And what that looks like is different for everyone because of colonial practices and impacts and trauma. Some of us have different levels of connection and knowledge and practice to our identity and to our culture. So that means what it means for you. It's honoring, knowing where you come from, honoring your ancestors and embracing your journey, even the hard parts as a part of your story and your dreaming. It's about being at peace with yourself. To me, this is the ultimate power, is to be so grounded within yourself and so at peace with yourself that when someone comes along and shakes the foundations of who you are, you have an anchor. You are so seated in your roots that it hurts. You can be taken away from it. You can be stretched, but you will always be able to come home to yourself because you know who you are. You are grounded and sovereign in your identity, in whatever that means for you. And it's in this self-acceptance, peace looks like acknowledging your worth without needing to prove it to others, holding space for your healing and recognizing your growth, being humble and open to learning or standing firm in your identity, knowing your value without needing external validation, living aligned with your values and staying connected to community, culture, and country. And this is important, you mob. This is going to be a series that unpacks these different yarns because this is what I'm seeing. So many powerful women and mothers in conflict with themselves or their other roles because we don't know how to sit with it and weave it together in a way that is seeded from our being. That is rooted in the essence of who we are, and we weave ourselves into those threads rather than becoming those threads of the roles that we hold. And narcissism is when we become separated from ourselves and others. We forget that we're a part of an ecosystem and we become the traumatized version of ourselves. Ego and trauma take us away from ourselves. This is why the warrior heart is about your reclamation of your power in your heart, because the heart doesn't lie. The heart bypasses ego and it bypasses trauma. It only speaks truth. And yet it takes courage and skill to be able to hear our hearts, particularly if we have had a lifetime of conditioning to say that who we are in our essence is not enough, is too much, or is not allowed. So every time we stand up and we say this is who we are, every time we take a step or act from our truth and our essence, we heal those in previous generations who couldn't or wouldn't do that. We set free and strengthen those who stand with us. We honor the ancestors that did do this, and we set free and resource the generations to come who will inherit from our legacy and our experience. And the difference between self-acceptance is rooted in self-love, humility, and truth, self-respect, personal responsibility. Narcissism is rooted in ego, insecurity, and control. In our self-acceptance, we're able to acknowledge and embrace all of ourselves in our darkness and our power. We seek connection, authenticity, and belonging, grounded in culture, community, and relational accountability. And we empower ourselves to serve others and walk in purpose. Whereas when you are in your trauma or your narcissism, you are disconnected from yourself and others. And this is about the warrior heart and the courage to be seen, to be raw and to be real about who you are to yourself as much as to the world. And it's about letting go of the shame and the fear and the hiding of yourself, of your doubts, of your trauma, of your mistakes. And it's a path of healing, sovereignty, and cultural truth. It is the reclamation of who we have always been and who we are called to become so that we set our daughters and we set others free. I want to ask you this. How would self-acceptance allow you to rise? How would accepting yourself and being yourself set you free and create self-determination and sovereignty for you, your children, your community, and your culture? And how does it allow you to rise for your dreaming, for your babies, and for your ancestors? A deep and powerful question, because this speaks to the core of the struggles that so many of us face as First Nations women, mothers, leaders, and warriors. This yarn is so important to me. It is so imperative that I had to take notes, because as the leaders and the warriors weaving the worlds together, being a bridge between the ancestral and the emerging, We're speaking to the tension between self and service, between cultural responsibility and personal well-being, and the pain of choosing yourself when others expect you to shrink, to stay in spaces and relationships, and what it means to be someone who has a big calling on your life, deep aspirations, human struggles of healing intergenerational trauma and growing yourself and nurturing yourself, particularly if you didn't grow up in that environment, whilst also raising the next generation and living in the world as it is. These are all heavy things that we all live with. And yet the question is, we're already doing it. So how do we do it in a way that comes from the overflow of our well-being and honors us in our humanity? And how do we weave our own needs and well-being into our dreams and our responsibilities and our priorities, and allowing our well-being to be the foundations of our life, of our love, of our leadership, of our dreams and our responsibilities. And from an ancestral lens, we are a part of the dreaming. The dreaming is not separate from us. The dreaming becomes possible through us. The dreaming and our love and our service and how we show up is influenced by our internal world, by our well-being. And do we consider ourselves a part of those that we love and serve? And how do we honor that if we've never had that, if we've never been gifted that or shown that that is possible? And we want to talk about some practical ways to weave ourselves into the dreaming, into our service and our love. Sacred self-time, deep self-care, naming and placing your non-negotiables in your schedule, in your dreaming map, reframing self-care as dreaming care. When you care for yourself, you are tending to the fire of your dreaming, to the fire of your legacy, to the fire that cares for your babies. And boundaries is not about saying no to other people. It is about saying yes to yourself. So you have the power and the capacity to show up, not just for now, but for the decades to come. And some of the questions we'll be going through is, what are your non-negotiable things that you need to keep your fire burning so that you can carry your dreaming and carry your roles and responsibilities? Another thing we'll be looking at is, what if others do not see themselves as beneficiaries of your truth and expect you to walk away from who you are? And this is where cultural courage and radical sovereignty are tested, where the truth is not everyone's going to understand your path. Not everyone's going to understand your dreaming, particularly if you are the one who is called. If your family hasn't been walking this journey, or if your family has been disconnected and you are the one building that reconnection and bringing it back together. If you are the one weaving and indigenizing yourself and your identity because your mum or your grandmother or your parents or your grandparents were disconnected because of colonialism and trauma, and you are the ones that your ancestor called to wake up your bloodlines, to wake up your songlines. Sis, that can be lonely, and not everyone's going to understand, not everyone's going to embrace you in that journey, and it can be lonely. And this is where you need to know yourself. You need to be so grounded in who you are that you can become sovereign and self-determined. That when you trust, when you come from your heart and obedience and surrender to your ancestors and to the calling on your life, that it's not just about serving now, it's about serving for a lifetime and generations to come. Because not everyone's meant to understand your journey or your dreaming. And sometimes they're going to ask you to choose between them and your truth, because your light threatens to expose what they are not ready to face in themselves, in the world, or in their culture. And sometimes they're just not meant to go with you. Sometimes you need to put people down to go where you need to go before you can reach back. Because we can only take people as far as we have taken ourselves. We can only share what we have. We can only gift the knowledge and the resources that we have given ourselves through our experiences. And we can only serve from the depths of who we are. So if we are not healing, if we are not taking responsibility for who we are and how we're showing up in the world, how can we serve those that we love from a healthy place? Sometimes we do more harm than good because we're not sitting with the truth of who we are and who we need to become. But here's the thing, true love does not require you to sacrifice yourself in order to love others. I'm not saying sacrifices won't be made. I mean, to grow a baby in your body is for a woman to gift her body to the life of a child. That in and of itself is a sacrifice. When we give birth to a child, regardless of whether that's a cesarean, a natural birth, an uncomplicated birth, to give birth is to lose oneself and to be reborn with that child. That is the ultimate sacrifice, is to bring life into the world. And then we sacrifice the first few months, the first few years of our life to nurture our child if you are the main caregiver. But what does that sacrifice mean long term? When do we expect others to start to carry themselves? Can we expect others to be co-contributors, to build relationships on respect, reciprocity, and responsibility, and that we are in this together? Because we were not born to dim our lights. We were sent here to be torchbearers, to be wayfinders, to be guides and creators for the next generation, for our children, for others. If you are someone who has this fire in you, this yarn is for you. And sometimes that means walking alone. I know this to be true because often the dreams that I've had other people with me, but I haven't always had them understand or be supportive of the bigger vision that I've held. And it's meant that I've made sacrifices at the time that may have seemed like I was sacrificing what was important. But at the time I believed in the bigger vision that I was carrying, that I thought I was doing the best I could with what I had. And I didn't have the foresight to envision what others might make that mean later on in life, how they would receive the vision that I held and what I wanted for them or for the world, and that it would be received that I was sacrificing others for myself and for a selfish vision. And this is why I want to have this hard yarn with you, is to speak truth, is that some people will not understand your journey because they're not meant to carry that fire. You were chosen for this. You were given this. You don't have to accept it. That's the other thing. You can say no to that calling and you can go about your life and just bury it. But at what cost? At what consequence? Who misses out if you bury your truth? Who misses out? What legacy are you leaving if you don't show up fully as you are? If you don't become your own purpose and develop your strengths and your gifts and heal the wounds inside that stop you and get in the way of you showing up fully as yourself? Because I honestly believe that our responsibility is to become the truest versions of ourselves, to come home to ourselves and belong to ourselves first, so that when we show up to others, we can do so from a place of integrity and authenticity and alignment, that we can love others through the love that we hold for ourselves and love from a healthy place of attachment and love. We're going to have a yarn about what to do when other people expect you to shrink, like speaking your truth gently and firmly, releasing people with love. Find your aligned circle. Trust that sometimes it's only for a season. Trust that your truth makes room for the right people to enter. And if you are coming from a place of love and alignment, then that's all you can do. You cannot control how others receive or perceive you. And what to do when it hurts. Remember that you're not walking for yourself. You're walking for your children, your ancestors, and the future ones are watching you choose truth over comfort every time. And what does it mean to cry and grieve and release and feel the hurt alongside standing in your truth? Because grief is sacred and we are meant to have this dreaming and we are meant to love others and we have responsibilities, but it doesn't mean that we need to abandon ourselves in that journey. And what does it mean to a reframe for the warrior heart and how to walk and weave this journey? I walk this path because my dreaming, my ancestors, and my purpose call me here. I will not abandon myself to make others comfortable. I choose to carry my light even if some cannot walk with me, because my truth is a torch for others still in the dark, including my children and future ones. To abandon that would be to abandon them. We'll be asking reflective questions that allow us to create space for journaling and storytelling and for truth to find us, to create sacred space within ourselves and in our lives, in our days and in our weeks, to go, well, what could this look like? What would it look like if I said yes? What would it look like if it was easy and aligned? And if I trusted and held a conviction that if my ancestors are calling me forth, if my heart is calling me forth, that this is for the betterment of everyone. And in order for others to become beneficiaries, I need to plant the seed. I need to allow the seed to take root, and I need to trust in the timing. That the day you plant the seed is not the day that you eat the fruit. And that sometimes you need to go alone. You need to walk the journey. You need to be prepared so that when you reach back to bring others with you, you can be the person who can carry them forward or who can nurture them forward and guide them forward, because you have walked the journey and laid the foundations for them to come. But you can also be the person who can be the guide, the wisdom holder, the knowledge holder, because you have done the journey, you have done the work. You have become who you needed to become. Some of the questions that we can look at is, what would my ancestors whisper to me when I doubt my right to stand in my truth? How does my well-being and truth serve not only me, but also my children, community, and dreaming? Who are the people who celebrate my light, and how can I lean into those relationships? What do I need to let go of to fully honor my truth? What does radical responsibility to my dreaming look like today in one small step? Because here's what I know. Our dreaming is a glimpse from our future selves and from our ancestors. It is a window, a view into what is already possible, what is already planted into our future and into our dreaming. And how we weave that from our dreaming into our now is by creating space for that to come through us, is creating space for that to become true, is creating space for is how do we become her now? How do we do the work of growing and reclaiming into the person that we need to be in order for, while I'm yarning with you, I'm texting my daughter because she must be calling me for something. The joys of parenting whilst weaving. So how do we ground ourselves in our culture in order to find ourselves and weave ourselves into our dreaming, into our hearts, and into our service and leadership? And it's also about naming the sacred tension between mother and woman and dreaming, and how do we carry the sacred roles that sometimes pull us in different directions. This is the tension that I hold right now, is the mother who wants to nurture and protect and be there fully, whilst also being a woman who's having her own human experience of healing and learning and acknowledging and letting go. See, this girl asking me, parenting. But then also having a calling on your life and aspirations, the dreaming woman, the leader, the warrior who is called to walk a path of purpose and healing beyond yourself, for your children, for others, for the ancestors, and for the next generation. How do we carry the tension in a way that stretches but amplifies our love and our service in those roles, but seated in our own well-being and our foundations? And how do we share our love in those roles in a way that is built in our integrity and meets our responsibilities in a way that shows our love, but it might not always be received as love? And what does love look like? And what do your children need from you as their mother? What do you need from yourself in order to be the mother that you will be proud of, that you will be satisfied with, that when you step back, you did the best you could with what you had and you gave your children everything that you had to give in a way that was from a self-sustaining place, an overflow? And love can look differently. It can be received differently. And what you do as an act of love might not always be received as an act of love. And sometimes what others may see as abandonment is actually you fighting to be whole, to break cycles, and to create a better future for your children by doing the work now. And it might be received as abandonment from those that you love, but in actuality, you're not just fighting for now, you're fighting for tomorrow. And choosing to walk in truth is an act of love for your children, even when they can't see it yet. You might be fighting for something that they don't see or understand yet. And sometimes you might not always carry that role, but how do you honor the feelings of those that you love and their truth without shrinking your own? How do you sit and create space for both truths to coexist, even if they don't weave together? Even if there needs to be compromise and boundaries in place, but you can each be with each other from a place of love, and that the truths may not align, but both truths are relevant and can coexist. How do you weave both roles together? And that's another thing we'll be yarning about and sharing from other women, is how do you communicate gently but firmly? Small sacred moments of connection, bringing other people into the dreaming, bringing your babies into the dreaming so that they can see the vision that you hold and ask them what it means for them, and involving them and role modeling what it looks like to love and honor yourself. These are all parts and elements of this series that I want to have, and other people that I want to bring in, because I want to honor all my roles. And I don't want to burn out. I don't want to abandon myself in love and sacrifice of others. I want to be able to weave myself into that love and service. And this is also me like having boundaries with my dreaming, and the bigger calling is to say that needs to honor and be done. What if me being me was the seed of how I could show up in all those roles and honor them from a place of love and integrity? And when love requires boundaries, because their vision of love and what it means to be a mother might not meet the vision that you hold and understanding that you hold of what it means to be a mother and to love. And that true love does not require us to erase ourselves or to forget ourselves in the bigger picture, and that our happiness can matter just as much as our children's. Our lives have meaning just as much as that of being a mother. And that sometimes we can love our children too much to teach them that loving someone else means giving up your whole self, because that's a toxic version of love. That's another form of abandonment that we don't need to think. And that sometimes it's about the legacy that we're building, that sometimes we had to give ourselves what our parents couldn't. And in breaking their cycles and thinking that we're setting our kids free, we're causing a different level of hurt. And that we can only do the best that we can. Warrior Heart Mamas, I see you. I am you. And I hope that these yarns honor and serve you in some way. And if our daughters one day hear this, or daughters of other mothers, I hope this serves and honors you in some way, to know that we showed up to do the best that we could, and we fought to create a new way, an old ancient way of love and contribution in a way that honored the sacred self, the sacred body and vessel, that my love and service came from the overflow of my well-being, that in order to honor you, I also had to honor myself, because who I am, how I show up for myself will ultimately influence and flow through to how I show up and love and service you. And what do we want our kids to remember? And remember that each season of parenting is exactly that. It's a season. One day they're babies, then they're toddlers, and they're little people, then they're preteens, then they're teens, and then they're young adults. And they have their own understanding and experience of the world. And it is not our job to carry our children's journey for them. Our job is to be, we don't own them. Our job is to be there to be the best guides that we can, to love them as best as we can and provide for them. But our job is not to disempower them or disrespect them by trying to walk the journey for them or carrying more than is our fair share of the load. After a certain point, there needs to be an expectation and an environment where they are expected to carry themselves, to show up for themselves with our support in the background. Some of the questions I want to ask you is, what do you want your children to remember about how you love them and how you loved yourself, and how those two things weren't in competition with each other? What lessons do you want to leave them about following their own truth? If your ancestors were sitting beside you now, what would they say about the choice to stand in your dreaming, to stand in your truth and your healing? And how can you show your children that you love them deeply while also loving yourself? And we'll be sharing some affirmations as well, like creating a personal letter to yourself, to your healing, to your children, grounding your path in sacred ceremony. And what does it mean to walk the tightrope between being a mother, a woman, and a dreaming woman, an ancestral woman, with roles and responsibilities bigger than just this current situation and generation. So weaving dreaming and motherhood, reclaiming love without self-abandonment. These are all different matters of honoring yourself as a woman, a dreamer, and a mother, reclaiming your love without self-abandonment, breaking generational cycles and reweaving old ones. So this is what this podcast is going to be about, this series. And I just lost my place on my notes. So weaving warrior heart, love, dreaming, and motherhood without losing ourselves. So this is for you. This is for our fight and our journey. And I have been you, I am you. I am walking my own journey of reclamation, of remembering, of striving to understand how to weave this all together, how to love others whilst loving myself, healing myself, learning to mother myself, because my mothers couldn't be there for me in the way that I needed, because they had to be there for themselves. Because I'm a woman walking this very real journey of motherhood, of dreaming, of humanity, of leadership, of trauma and adversity and healing, reclaiming my narrative from a place of empowerment and strength, not justifying or birthing my story from trauma and adversity. And that my love for others and learning how to hold it all without losing myself, holding all those roles, all that love without losing myself in the mix, but also holding the vision without losing those that I love. And I have not always walked that journey well. I know that my babies will have chapters where they feel that I was not there. And in truth, I probably wasn't there for them when they needed me the most. I thought I was being there by focusing on other things. And there's more complexity to this story. It's more nuanced than what I'm sharing here. It's a space for truth telling. It's a place for me to share my journey with you of being in this space of being an entrepreneur, a woman with a calling, purpose, and a leadership bigger than myself, of wanting more for myself and wanting more for my children, and rather than just settling for resilience and survival. I want to be able to live a space for truth telling and naming the tensions of being a woman who carries a big dreaming, deep love and cultural obligations, but also needing space for my own humanity, my own healing, my own capacity and capabilities, and the reality of my life and what it means to be a woman, a mother, and a First Nations woman in the 20th. And from knowing what it feels like when the people you love don't accept you because you show up differently to what they expect. So it's a space where we weave it all together, dreaming, love, leadership, obligations, and humanity in a way that holds us whole. So this series matters because I've lived the tension of this. I'm living it. I've been through it. And I want to have these yarns in the hope that they will serve someone else, that someone else can learn from our examples. They can take things from our journeys, and that having these yarns here will serve our daughters and show them that we showed up, that we fought with these internal battles to seek to understand how to carry it all, how to hold it all without losing ourselves and without losing them. and to give them a new model of living and leading and loving in a way that also honors them. And I know this tension. I know the human experience of someone who needs love and space and care and didn't get it, of being the one responsible for everything and feeling like no one was there for me, that I wasn't allowed to ask for help. And that when I did ask for help, the pain of loving people and holding community but feeling unseen or rejected because I wouldn't shrink to fit other people's expectations. The ache of trying to be all things for everyone and losing pieces of myself in the process. And I know what it's like to abandon myself, to leave parts of myself behind because I thought that would make me acceptable and more lovable to others, until the day I decided no more. Until the day I decided that I could no longer live with myself or live in abandonment of myself in service of others. And that the most powerful way that I could love others is to love myself, but that would require going on a journey and letting go of all the places and relationships and dreams that did not honor or respect or love me as I was, in a way that I was allowed to be myself, that it was safe to be myself. And I don't want my daughters to inherit this pattern. I want them to be able to create their own path and their own story, and it may not be received in the way that I intended. And yet this is what I feel called to do, about learning to love, live and lead from the seeds of who we are and to stop abandoning ourselves in the process. And this podcast is for anyone that's ever felt torn between loving others and loving yourself. If you have a dreaming or a calling, and there's that tension between the roles and responsibilities you hold, your own humanity, and the dreaming that is on your life. And how do we hold it all? For those that feel the tension between dreaming and humanity, are culturally and ancestrally called, but also tired and healing and needing space. It's about reconnecting to culture and self after trauma and colonization of being told who to be, having been rejected or judged by the people we love because they choose our truth over fitting in. And this is for women ready to love, lead, and live from their own seeds, from who you are, and not from others' expectations. So from this series, you can expect storytelling, examples from other women, love letters, affirmations, practical steps, a sounding board for your own experience, a witness and a way forward from those of us that are or have walked this journey. And everyone's journey is different. And what tools do we need to walk forward? Because here's the thing, loving takes courage, leading takes courage. And how do we love and lead in a way that also allows us to live our humanity from a place of love and well-being? How do we honor our own humanity and our truth? And maybe, just maybe, what if all this becomes possible from who we are, and that all we have to do, and it's as simple as us being ourselves and only ourselves, nothing less but nothing more than who we are, and showing up and contributing from what we have in a way that honors things. We'll also be yarning about Wapanya, which is a Barkindji principle of to keep giving back. And this idea that in order for country to live, it must first take what it needs. And it responds to the seasons. It's innately intuitive, is its intelligence, and its existence, its survival is dependent upon it taking what it needs first, and it only giving to others what it has to give from its overflow, not to the detriment or the death of the self. Country is our greatest teacher. Our ancestors have already laid the blueprint. It is already back there. All we have to do is have the courage to reach behind us and call for it, or allow it to call us. It is in our songlines. It is in our ancestors. It's in country. So that's Wapanya, Dadidi, deep listening, sacred contemplation. And this is gifted to us by Annie Rose Ammenberg. Womenjeka from the Wurundjeri people, the Woiwurrung language of the Wurundjeri people, means to come with intention. What is your purpose for being here? Harambe is a Kenyan concept of individual contribution to the collective purpose. Mana wahine, the power of the woman, a Māori practice. These are all different things that I'm learning and studying in trying to better understand how I can walk this journey in a way that is honoring, in a way that is becoming. And this is about a bigger vision of how do we hold our dreaming and our motherhood without breaking ourselves to fit others' molds of who we need to be. It's about breaking toxic colonial and patriarchal ideas of love and service, re-indigenizing what love, leadership and womanhood and motherhood look like and should be like and can be like. Living and loving and leading from the seeds planted by our ancestors, our culture and our dreaming, and leaving legacies of wholeness and truth for our children. Because we were meant to live our life small. We're not meant to just survive. We are meant to thrive. We are meant to live wholly from who we are. But that only becomes possible if we have the courage to say yes. And sis, I remember the day. I remember the moment that I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. That couldn't allow this to be my legacy and my example for those that I love, and that I was meant for more than how I was living. Even though I was living big, in some ways I was still playing small. The picture wasn't complete. I was still hiding parts of myself. I was still carrying shame and guilt for who I was and who I wanted to be. And that disconnect was killing me. It was fracturing me piece by piece. And I realized that when I was down to the threads of who I was, and I had to choose between the life I was living and the life I was called for, in the end, I chose my truth, I chose my power, and I chose my heart. And I know what it is to stand there broken and exhausted and so tired, my soul being tired from being ignored, my spirit being tired from speaking a truth that wasn't my own, and understanding that that wouldn't be for everyone. And that was the day that the most powerful thing I could do for those that I love is to learn how to love myself and how to come home to myself and belong to myself, so that when I showed up to be there for others, I could do so as myself. Nothing less and nothing more. How that was received by others was not my responsibility, but from a place of love and acceptance, not trauma and adversity and ego. So I hope that you're as excited and ready for this deep and needed reckoning. These yarns need to be had around how do we weave ourselves into our dreaming, into our motherhood from a place of love and service, not from abandonment and burnout. If you want to know more, please subscribe and follow below. Send me a message, leave a comment. And if you want to join me in this community, in this journey, and you want to do this work at a deeper level, come and check out our community over on School, the Warrior Heart Community. The link for the community is below. Big love you, mob, and we've got this. These yarns need to be had, and this will be the focus of the Warrior Heart for the foreseeable future.